My name is Milt Ray. I was in the Navy. Of course, my own experiences with World War II, dealing with an awful lot of death, a lot of people. I went through 9 invasions, and you become hardened to the point that you can operate where people around you are being killed, but you don't really feel it. It's just part of the business of fighting a war. But when it's over with and you begin thinking about it, it really comes down on you. And a lot of guys can't handle that. They have nervous breakdowns. But I was just a dumb kid, and it was a great experience, really. I went over to Hawaii after about a year after Pearl Harbor. But during that year, nothing much was done. So it was still shot up over there pretty good. All the ships were all laying around, turned upside down. But we started across the Pacific, one island at a time. Really, the first big one was Tarawa and Macon. And it was rather strange to enter a war. You're used to saying, okay, hold your hands up, we'll capture you. That didn't happen. We ended up killing every single one of the Japanese that were on the island. And it was just a massacre. And then we came back to Hawaii, went through more training, back down to Kwajalein in the Marshall Islands, and that was a similar program where we ended up killing every single Jap that was on the island. And they preferred that. If we didn't kill them, they killed themselves. It was more than giving up. It was something they were trained not to do. And so we had to deal with that. The island of Saipan was just a big old ugly mountain that came up out of the ocean. And they had dug caves all through it. And it was almost impossible to shoot them or to get them out, but it was usually the flamethrowers were the best, because we could stick that down into a cave, and the flames would take care of everybody in it. Tinian, we expanded the airfield, and eventually we were able to use it for the B-29s that took the bomb to Japan. The Philippines was different in the fact that we now, for the first time, had a country that we were fighting. So that we had to take parts of it. And we got up to Langang Gulf and all these different islands all through the Philippines. They had to be taken individually. And then we went to Borneo, and that was a different kind of a war. The worst thing about Borneo was the weather. It's just, you just perspire it's so hot and so miserable that you can't wait to get out of there. And also, that was a little different because we used 100% of the troops were from Australia, whereas all the ships were American Navy ships. So we worked up a deal between the two of us and was able to capture Borneo. But the jungle warfare there was really horrible. So it, but we did the job eventually. When my job, by the way, was taking the troops ashore in a landing craft, and it was very difficult because you're on top of the water, and the Japanese were buried in pillboxes, and they really were terribly difficult to get out. I ended up getting part of the boat that I was driving blown away, and I finally was able to get it so that I could operate it, and took it back to my ship, and they took it aboard, and of course the captain says, "What did you do to this boat?" And I said, "Those guys in there are bad guys. They don't like me. They don't like you." And he's holding the piece of paper, and he says, "Do you know anything about this?" And I said, what are you talking about?" He said, "Well, this is from Admiral Turner, and he said to transfer you immediately to him he's on the Rocky Mountain. It's a flagship that was in charge of the whole shebang." And he took me over and pointed at a boat. He said, "That boat down there," he says, "is a custom-made boat that I had made for myself." He said, "Do you think you can run that?" And I said, "I can run anything that's on the water," because I was a qualified helmsman on the ship, and I'd been in boats for some time. And so the majority of the secretive planning was done in my boat. I'd pick him up and other admirals and other generals, and they'd sit in the boat and discuss what they were going to do next and how they were going to do it, and get into horrendous arguments, a lot of profanity, but nobody knew anything about it except me, because I was driving the boat. I was inside with them. And the only problem that I had was that they never asked me for my opinion. They knew that I didn't like a lot of things they did and talked about, which was kind of fun. They made jokes out of it, but you learn that they're not gods. They make a lot of mistakes, but they they try to make things work, and sometimes they don't. And they made some terrible mistakes. A lot of lives were lost. But you can justify it because they'd never fought a war before. And so they had to just do the best they could. But I had the pleasure of meeting just about every major admiral in the Navy and most of the generals in the Army and the Marine Corps. They liked my boat. they all wanted to drive it, and it had a lot of power. You jump right out of the water, and yeah, every invasion had its own idiosyncrasies, and you had to rethink everything, replan everything, and then what didn't work, try it a different way. And there's a lot of stories about decisions that were made that were wrong, but you really couldn't blame these admirals and generals. They were doing the best they could. And the only problem with it is that they're judged by the lives that are lost, and we lost a lot of lives. You become hardened to the fact of bodies around you and that are wounded, and every time that would take troops or food or equipment or ammunition into an island, we'd pick up the wounded soldiers and put them in our boat and take them back out to the ships where they had doctors out there that would work on them. So you'd deliver a whole lot of machine gun shells, and you pick up a whole bunch of guys that are wounded. And so you learn to take care of them. If they're screaming, you yell at them to shut up. But if they're quiet, you really worry about them because their pain is so much they don't do anything, they just ball up. And so you give them shots of morphine and sulfamilamide between the shore and the ship. That was your job as a boat coxswain, to take care of your wounded soldiers. It was a horrible thing for a kid to have to live through, but you do what you have to do. And besides that, it helps if you're stupid. As a kid, you didn't worry about all these things. You couldn't really. If you did, you'd have a nervous breakdown. But you just do what you have to do. And if you're middle-aged, I don't think you can stand it. But if you're 18 years old, you can do anything. And it turned out to be a real learning experience.
How so?
I'm sorry?
What did you learn?
Really, that you have to be kind. you're dealing with people that are in a really a high stress situation. Everybody, the kids that are out there in the front lines being killed off, and the admirals and the generals and the captains that are running the war, they're making mistakes, doing all sorts of things that are wrong, but they're trying hard as they can to do what's right and win the cotton-picking war. In dealing with people under those circumstances, you learn just to laugh and put up with it. And it's difficult to put yourself in that position, but when you do it, you find it's not as bad as you think it would be. No, at one time, I remember a very direct hit on the head. It was at Saipan, and we had lost so many people, and that I had to deal with so many of them that had been killed. And when we'd take them out to the ships, half of them would die. Well, if we go out to sea, we'd bury them at sea, and we'd try to make it as nice as we could, put a flag over them, say a prayer, and dump them in the ocean. But if we were at an island, well, then we'd take it to shore, and they'd back a truck up, and we'd put them in the truck. And on this one occasion, the bag that they put the body in was rather loose, so that when I grabbed this obviously by the shoulders, and we put it in this truck, and I slid the body forward in the truck, and I let it go. And it went down, and its head hit the edge of the truck bed and went just a real crack. And I laughed. I said, well, I really screwed up there. And I turn around, and there's 7, 8 Marines that had just come back from the front line, and they were all filthy dirty. And they're looking at me. Any one of them could have been that guy. And they're looking at each other like, I realize that I'm about to probably be killed, because they're looking at me and they're so furious that I would treat this body like that. It drove home to me how you can get so used to being around death and destruction that you don't really care about it. And so much of our troops had to put up with that. But I cried. I cried for a day because I realized how much this has taken advantage of I just realized that these poor guys that are being killed, and even more so the poor guys that are going to live after going through all this. And I never again treated a dead body with nothing but respect. they don't stop being people just because they die. And so that's what I learned there. there.
Were you excited about coming here?
Pardon me?
Were you excited about this trip?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
A bunch of old cronies, particularly now over a period of years. We started out, we'd have something like this, we'd have 3 times as many people here. But gradually, every year they die off, and now there's just a few of us left. And it's interesting, to say the least.
Why is that?
Well, just because the guys have one thing in common. They know that everybody else has been through the same experience, and you don't talk about it, but they know. And it's kind of interesting. It's not fun, but it's nice to be able to talk to them and have them tell their experiences.
When someone says thank you, there have been a lot of thank yous. I've seen it on this trip anyway. I mean, when someone stops to say thank you, what's that like for you?
It's nice. It's nice to be appreciated. You know that they don't really understand because they haven't lived through it. But still, it's nice that they're trying and trying to be kind and thoughtful, and most of the organizations now are just a few. There's not many of us, and particularly there's hardly any that have been through the actual horrors of the war. It affects you. You never get over it. Here I'm 90 years old, and I'm having the same problem now that I had 50 years ago. But that's just the way it is. My book says war is hell. And that's true.
I know it's hard for you to speak about the saying your son's name today, but I did want to ask, why did you want to see his name up there? I guess.
My son?
Yes, sir.
Because it's a way that our government wants to show appreciation. We know that it's a drop in the bucket as to how they really feel. But what else is there? They're doing the best they can. And that's what I mean. You learn to be kind. When you see your boy's name up there, you think, well, gee, that's nice. And that's pretty little but what are you going to do? What's the government going to do? The poor kid's dead and gone. But it's nice at least that they're showing some sort of recognition. And it really hits you. A lot of us say the same thing, as that you feel like you've been hit. All of a sudden you think, It's a stupid wall with some people's names on it. Big deal. It is a big deal. It's a lot of caring goes with it.
Tell me your son's name. Tell me your son's name.
How many what?
Yeah, tell me your son's name.
Oh, his name is Randolph Ray. I have a grandson named Randolph Ray, but we call him Randy. And he was in the Green Beret and Special Forces, and he loved it. He loved the action part of it. He didn't like the killing part of it. But he spent 6 months out in the jungle following the Viet Cong around and reporting their action. And after 6 months, they took people and they didn't have to go out into the jungle anymore. They worked as instructors to tell the other kids how to do it. And where he was located was in a field, and some helicopters came in and landed, and when they came down, the Viet Cong attacked the helicopters, and one of them had a pilot that had taken my boy back and forth to the jungle. And so my kid jumped up and ran out into the field and pulled this guy out of this helicopter and was dragging him off the field when a mortar shell blew up and killed them both. And they gave him a Silver Star, big deal. But he was doing what he thought was the right thing to do. That's war is hell.